Okay, tweeting. Skip the chat on the left. Okay, looks like audio is good. This is the Sausage Sports Club weekly update. I do this every week to talk about how the game's going. I do this for 4 reasons. One is that I think it's a useful resource for students or new developers to see what it's like to make a commercial indie game. And I feel like I missed out on that kind of resource, so I want to pay it forward. 2 is the obvious marketing reason of if you don't talk about your game, people won't hear about it, so I want to make sure I talk about it and have new content every week or whatever. 3 is a selfish reason of like in 5 or 10 years it will be cool to look back on how I learned to make games and what my first project was like. So I can remember when I learned something, or like remembering a way I used to do things that I stopped doing for some reason. So that's just a cool thing for me. And then the 4th reason is sometimes people come join the chat and see I'm doing something in a stupid way and they comment that, and then I get better at doing that thing, so that's useful as well. This week I have my list as usual. The focus this week was on the overworld. I had been kind of putting off for a long time actually working on the Hollywood biome. It's like a hard thing to design, and laying out a space that I'm unsure of the design on is like a particular pain point for me, and like a thing I avoid a lot. So it's just like something I didn't want to work on. But now like as of last Monday, I decided, okay, I'm not going to do anything else. I'm not going to let myself write any code until there's like pretty good progress on this last section of the overworld that's not done at all yet. So I worked on that. Let me skip so that I can actually get to the last part. So the idea of this new section is that it's Hollywood, but the Sausage Sports Club version, which is Sportsville, and it's filled with different movie sets, and that includes this exterior Western thing. And one thing that I might have to work on once it's like closer to being done is like communicating that it's a movie set rather than just like a Western biome or whatever. And one way I hope to communicate that is with these cameras placed all over the place. There's some there, there's some here. There's also going to be like a movie set, like production set entrance, where there's like this car gate thing, and there's going to be like a hot dog cart over here and some director's chairs and maybe some camera equipment and stuff. These are going to be like nice looking Hollywood buildings. I'm actually going to reference like the entrance to different production lots and stuff. This area over here is also going to be similar, where this entrance to the biome, or to the Tiny Tokyo Arena, is going to be decorated as like either an actual production building with like a movie poster on the outside and like a big door, or maybe it'll be like a small movie theater to test productions or something like that. Let me just jump in here. And each of these buildings in the Hollywood biome are going to be they're each going to have a different movie set in the interior that's not a Western themed thing. So if I go in here, this is going to be potentially like a concert venue. I'm not sure which building is going to be what yet. I know there's going to be a concert venue with instruments for people to play with. This is going to be another one. And obviously there's nothing in there yet. I have to pretty it up. And the effect of like going in there and then the building roof disappearing and the black kind of coming into the sides is still in progress. So if that looks weird, don't worry about it. I guess it's also worth noting that all of the lighting, like the light maps of the overworld, are like super low res temp, because I want to make sure that I can iterate quickly rather than waiting like 45 minutes for a light bake. I set it to really low settings so that it only takes like 5 minutes instead of like 40 minutes. So that's why that is the way it is. Let's go back to Hollywood. So I don't know how I transitioned from my big list to this specifically, but like I said, I guess the focus this week is on the overworld. The other big thing that somehow I put off for a very long time was adding a front wall to the hub to keep you from just like walking off into the void and dying. There's no collision on it, but you won't be able to jump over this fence. That's kind of a paradigm I use all over the game of like things that look like a barrier that would keep you out will keep you out, even if it's technically not like tall enough to keep you out forever. I might raise the fence a little bit higher, but there's a weird I have a weird conflict of like I don't want to obscure the view of the player too much, but I also don't want to fade out this fence because it is a fence and like you shouldn't think that you can go over it. I'm also going to need to tweak this entrance to the desert a little bit because I don't want people to think they can get up on this and like walk around the fence, which it seems like you can do now, and that's fine. Thanks, dude. Yeah, so the front wall is weird. It took me like this was on my list, like this and the Hollywood thing were both on my list for a long time, and because they're both a lot. Well, the front of the hub is like there's like an obvious easy way to do it, which is what I ended up doing, or there's like a more complex, interesting way to do it where it could be like there could be like stands and people are watching. There could be like a studio audience kind of thing, like you might see on a sitcom. There could be like what's that movie with Jim Carrey and he's like in a reality TV show for his whole life, but he doesn't know it. Truman Show. Be like a Truman Show thing where there's like a secret door to kind of hint that the characters don't know they're in a show or whatever. But it basically was hard for me to make a decision because there was no deadline on this and there was other more important stuff to do, so I just kept putting it off. And similarly for Hollywood, because it's not as straightforward as like a jungle or the ocean or a desert, it was a lot harder for me to actually nail down like out of the thousand of things that a Hollywood biome or a Hollywood kind of like little area could be. It was hard for me to decide what it should be, and I felt like I needed to rationalize why it was whatever it was. And now that I'm kind of down to the wire of trying to ship the game, I'm more leaning towards like what's the most obvious possible thing it could be. Like how could I most easily communicate this is supposed to be like Hollywood, there are movie sets, like it's a playground for you, but it's like the theming is that it's a movie set, and it would make sense that Sausage Sports Club would be filmed right next to a Hollywood, Hollywood type of area because it's a reality TV show, and that it makes sense that that would be in like an LA kind of area or like a Hollywood. So that's how that choice ended up getting made. And I'm still having the same kind of issue with the interiors. Like I'm not sure what the other one should be besides the concert venue, and I want to lead it by. I feel like I should make that decision based off of what toys I think are really cool and I like people to have fun with, and so I have a big list, but I haven't nailed it down yet. I guess before I move on to the Unity upgrade stuff, I can talk about this effect. As you see when I go into a building, there's like a transition to interior mode where the rest of the map is kind of like blacked out and all you can see is the interior. And there's also like this kind of circle wipe looking thing. This is all temporary, and this is one of the things I want to try to work on during the work session after I finish the update. But the idea is that each of these interiors is supposed to feel thematically separate from the like Western setting of the outside movie set. And to do that, I need to visually like not let you see the Western thing anymore. If this was a concert venue with like a stage and instruments on the stage, and maybe there's a bar, maybe there's like instruments and cool lighting, and oh, that's funny. Shouldn't be able to do that. And stuff like that. And also like along the edge of the screen, there's just like Western like dirt, like tan dirt, and like a saloon looking building and like wood panels and stuff. It's not gonna make sense. It's gonna be like visually hard to read what's going on. But if when you go in, you like fade everything to black and all you can see is the concert, then it suddenly makes a lot more sense. And because I'm proud of how it works, I want to talk about the implementation of this. It's based on an idea that I've been trying to figure out how to do in Unity for a couple years, which is and that idea is that you can have an image effect that runs across the whole screen that respects the stencil buffer, which is when you're drawing, when you're rendering to the screen and everything in the scene has materials on it and has a shader run on it. In that shader, you can write some data to a special buffer that's just like a number that can be used by later things that get rendered, or apparently by an image effect. And it's basically like, I want to mark this object for some specific use later on. UI uses it for like masking. Like if I have a UI panel with a grid, like a row of items, and I want the row of items to be longer than the width of the bar or whatever that holds the items, when the items go off the screen, they get cut off rather than the item bar continuing off screen. And that's what's called a mask. And the mask is done by writing everything you want to be contained in that buffer, or in that box, writing that to like a stencil, and then anything that's not in that box, you don't write like the matching key to your stencil buffer. And so when you render that thing, you check the stencil and it's not matching like what it needs to be rendered to be in the box, so you skip it. For this effect I'm doing here, I've got this mesh I've made that matches the part of the building that I want to see when I go inside it. So it's like the front wall and the top, and I put this shader on it that all it does is write. It returns 0, so there's nothing rendered, and it's transparent so that nothing gets rendered. And we write 50 into the stencil buffer, and we say the comparison is always, so we don't even test if we match some number, we just always do this. And if we pass, the command we use is replace, which means we write 50 into the buffer. So all this mesh does in the scene when it's being rendered is it writes to our stencil buffer and says 50 for all of these pixels. Like that's what's here. And then let's grab our camera, aim object, align view. Okay. And so on the camera, we've got this indoor mask effect, which is a component, and the component is based on Unity's like standard assets image effect, which has a bunch of stuff in it to like, I'm only using it, I guess, to cache a material. So whenever we use this material, if there's no material, we create a new one based on, we create a new material that we don't save, and it's based on a shader that we supply in the inspector. And then after, on post render, which is after the scene has been rendered, after this camera has rendered, we call this function, and that does graphics blit null as render texture, which is something I didn't know you could pass into blit. But what this means is we take whatever is in the what do you call it? Whatever's on the screen right now, and then just like blit, take that and then blit back to that, and we can pass a material, and then this material just uses our shader, like I said, and this material says for anything that's not equal to the thing the stencil value we set, you know, in that mesh, you know, the front and top of the building. If it's not equal to that, then return 0, which in this case, because this isn't a transparent object, is just black. And so that's what we get. Anything that's not in that thing, you know, gets set to black. And that's what we want. and that's really as simple as it is. The hardest part of it was trying to figure out what is the thing I need to tell the camera to get it to like do this to the existing render buffer instead of having to like cache this in a render texture or something. Not that you can't do that, it's just like weird, like to do that when all we want to do is just take the screen and then look at the stencil and write black to whatever's not there. So something I want to do in my work session is like after I do the update is go over this effect and make it better. It currently, you might have noticed, it's kind of poppy, like it's too fast and it's not clear there are transitions happening. And part of it is that the building interiors look kind of crappy. Like I'm not disabling all the objects I need to. So there's a few things. Like you can see on the edge, I can't point with my finger. Up here you can see that if I move slowly, there's like a circle kind of thing. And this wasn't my first attempt at making a good looking transition was to make a, this is super dumb, to have a sphere just expand and shrink based on how far away you are from the door. So if you're very close to the door, the sphere is very large, and then as you go deeper into the room, the sphere shrinks, and the sphere is doing the same masking effect oh, there you can see it pretty well. It's doing the same, yeah, the same unlit, sorry, the same stenciling that mesh along the front and top of the building did. But because it's a sphere and it's shrinking, it makes like a circle wipe effect. And it's cool, but it doesn't, because it's attached to my movement, it just feels janky when I'm moving. And really what you want is, and the other thing I should mention, when you get in there, all the stuff on the top just pops off or pops on, because that doesn't link to the fade effect. It just feels weird. So what I want to do in the work session is, instead of linking that circle wipe to my movement, and instead of popping everything on the roof off as soon as I enter the camera zone, I want to hook this stuff up to a coroutine so that circle wipe happens as a timed sequence, and the roof disappearing also happens as a time sequence. Preferably it would be like in time with the camera transitioning, but I don't know if I'm going to get that far. And also I need to make sure to disable the this awning and these two things here, because when I get in, you can see that you can, through the, even though the mask is like masking off the front wall, it doesn't differentiate the awning from the front wall. It's just like, these pixels on the screen are the pixels that I'm saving to not be blacked out by the stencil buffer. Oh, the awning is there. That's like I don't know about that, so I can't turn it off. So my solution needs to be to just like manually like disable like set that game object inactive. So that's that. Okay. Okay. So that's that. Another big time sink this week was I upgraded my version of Unity, and the idea of that was to get any benefits they've added to the like new Switch update. I can't really talk about what they did, like what the improvements were, but in my game I noticed I got slightly better physics performance. There was a issue with grab passes, which is like in Sausage, when you respawn, there's like you like float up into the air and then spawn into a bubble, and then you float around a little bit until you're ready to resume playing, bubble. And that bubble uses a grab pass to take whatever's already been rendered behind it and then do like a UV distortion effect along the edges of the bubble to make it look like it's refracting light like a bubble does. And a few previous versions of Unity, including the one that I had been working up until this week, had an issue where at certain angles from the light, I can't remember if it was if the bubble was at a certain angle relative to the camera, or if it was a certain angle relative to the light in the scene or whatever, but there was some issue where it would flicker darker or lighter at certain angles relative to something, and it was super broken. And it was a documented Unity bug, and they fixed it, and it was fixed by this upgrade. Things that aren't great from this. Another good thing is that Unity added instancing as an option on all shaders, where you just check a box on the material. Let me just grab the material to look at. Yeah, you can just enable GPU instancing now, and that's cool. And previously, to make a shader instance, you had to add several lines of code, of shader code, which wasn't like super annoying, but it was super annoying, but it wasn't like a showstopper by any means. And I had been using instancing before, but now it's nice. Like I can just like have instancing as a checkbox instead of having to add it manually. Okay, so that's that. That instancing change broke my in Tiny Tokyo. I had this cool system of trees that were, rather than being 3D objects, it was just a quad, a square that would always face the camera no matter where the camera was. And now that doesn't happen. Or sorry, when I upgraded, the instancing on that shader was broken, so instead of all of them being batched into one draw call, now now each one is its own draw call. So my fix to that was to just make them 3D and just like use a regular basic ass shader and turn instancing on that. And so now, instead of being one draw call, instead of being one draw call for each tree, now it's one draw call for each type of tree like it was before. And they get statically batched, I think. No, they get instanced. So it's like similar to what it was before, but with more polygons, I guess. But I think because it's instance, it probably doesn't matter much. It hasn't slowed down my performance at all to make that switch. It's just like, I don't know, I like the cool solution of using the billboarding trees. Other stuff. There's a crash on Switch when you use the function overlap box, which is, it's just a physics call. Overlap, just to show you what I'm talking about. Not prefab. I don't know why you want prefab. Overlap box, not alloc. Yeah, so this is the function where you can specify a position and rotation and, you know, like size and center of a box. And you can define a layer to effect, and you can, this non-alloc version lets me save the colliders that I overlap with into a array without having to allocate an array. And this function, for whatever reason on Switch, like crashes like very regularly. So I had to not use it. And rather than saying, oh, this is gonna break my upgrade, I'm not gonna do it, I said, okay, what is it possible to, you know, react to this and like change my code a little bit so that I can not use this function that's problematic, but still get this upgrade for the other benefits that it gives. And this was like a little bit of work there. I have this system in my code base where I have what's called an overlap sensor, which is I have a sensor and like an overlap sensor. A sensor is just a script that I can put onto a trigger, and it will keep track of anything that enters and exits that trigger. And it's a generic sensor CS, not comma CS, just CS, sensor CS. Yeah, so it's just generic, and so whenever I want to use this on a component, I have to write a new script like player physics sensor, and derive from that, and, you know, define the type, and then just write the new. If there's some weird way to like speed up, you know, speed up getting the thing versus whatever the default sensor method is. Trigger enter ID sense map. It's interesting. Yeah, so rather than do a get component, I try to use a dictionary of like things I've hit to the type. And I'm not really sure this is actually faster anymore. Since profiling get component more, it's like pretty much just a dictionary lookup of a component, I believe. But anyway, that's not the point of this conversation. So that's what a sensor does. An overlap sensor, on the other hand, rather than relying on a trigger, which in some cases is like very expensive to add to a scene. If I need to have like a giant trigger in the scene that needs to like check collision against a bunch of different types of things, that can get really expensive really fast. Like if there's 100, you know, if there's 100 things that it needs to collide against and the trigger's really huge, then there's going to be a lot of overlaps. Potentially every frame there could be tons of overlaps, and that would cause physics callbacks, which are just expensive. So an overlap sensor, instead of doing that, what I do is I do either, if it's got a box collider, I take the info about that box collider and use this overlap box function to get a list of the colliders, and so I can maintain my own list of things I've hit in the same way that a trigger would, but with more control. Like I can be more specific about what I want to overlap against, without having to use layers. And the other important thing is that I can set this to be update mode rather than fixed update mode. So while a trigger, you know, every physics step resolves against everything else in the scene. Thanks, Dandy. 2727, also welcome. So instead of every fixed update doing all this collision overlap, I can do it every update, which is potentially less often than every fixed update. So that's the idea of the overlap sensor, and basically what I did for this is I wrote a nasty error warning when on awake when an overlap sensor is set up, and if it's the type of overlap sensor that's going to use a box, I just log a big nasty error saying this is deprecated, don't do this. And then I had to go through everywhere in the game that was using overlap sensors that are boxes and switch them to be triggers, and that I don't think performance changed much as a result of that, but I got rid of that crash and I got to have the other benefits of the upgrade, so it was worthwhile. The other stupid thing that I'm sure will get figured out very soon, but is a very annoying thing so far, is that I can't make development builds on Switch. Like I can't make a build that I can plug into Unity and profile. So me profiling and working on the build is I make a release build and then I turn on my frame rate counter and then I dig it is it better than it was, and that's all I can do right now. So if there's not, so it might be that I hear back from other people on the forums and they say, oh, there's no solution to this, you're just gonna have to upgrade to the next version of Unity, and I might have to do that. So we'll see. Unity upgrade. Yeah. So there's that. I did more optimization stuff. I don't really want to go through each of these things, but they're on the screen if you want. The one I will mention, I guess, because it's related to the overworld stuff, is that previously all of my plants in the overworld, the trees and the plants, you know, the little plants and everything, previously I was these being instance right now or static? I don't know which is, oh, I guess they're light maps, so I need to do it as static. Previously I was using LODs, which is level of detail, to swap out all of my trees for lower poly trees when the camera got farther away. And this seemed to be pretty useful because I would fly into this forest, there's all this stuff that's, it's like transparent, overlapping, there's overdraw. So the farther I get, if the ones that are farther away go to lower poly and eventually disappear if they're far enough away, then I'll get frames back. But really that was I was fixing the symptom rather than the problem. And the problem is that the shader on the trees were too expensive for my platform, and by doing this LOD thing, I was adding extra overhead like in the middle of transitions between two LODs, and because my LOD distances were so aggressive, the transitions were happening a lot, so I was basically like doubling my draw calls whenever I was moving in the jungle, and that made it this is like not something I've profiled, but it seemed like it made it just as bad as if I just like didn't have LODs at all. So I'm gonna try going back to not having LODs. That brings me back to another thing I want to work on during the work session, which is an idea I had that's kind of inspired by a talk the team that made Inside gave about their game, where it's their game is like, if you haven't heard of Inside somehow, it's a side-scroller 2D puzzle platformer thing, but pretty much the entire world is like an open, seamless, you can just run left to right through the entire world of the game, which is like maybe like a 4 or 5 hour experience. You can just start on the left and run right for 4 hours, and it's one giant level basically. Obviously it's not really one level, they stream in levels as chunks or whatever, but it exists as, you know, it can exist in the scene at one time. It could potentially exist in the scene at one time. And anyway, the thing that they spoke about in a GDC talk is that they split their scenes up into like different. It's been a while since I've seen the talk, so I might not have the vocabulary for it exactly, but that they use exactly. But they basically split their scene up into layers of gameplay and then rendering stuff, and then what was it? There were three groups. I forget what the third one was. It might have been like gameplay and then like important environment, like gameplay geometry, basically. Gameplay would be like the player and like other actors and like boxes you can push around and stuff like that. And then important relevant gameplay geometry would be like the actual level that you play on, and then the other part would be like environment details, like the background or like water or stuff like that. And they would gameplay stuff's really important. It needs to be simulated, so they would just leave that stuff on. But when you left a section, they would turn off, you know, they would have groups. They would like group environment details into like by hierarchy, like all the stuff in this part is under one parent, all the stuff in this part is under one parent, all the stuff under that part is under one parent. And they would just turn off stuff that you couldn't see on screen, basically. And that Unity does that internally through calling, like if I'm looking this way, all of the stuff that's behind me isn't being rendered because that would be a waste of the camera's time. But before the camera knows not to render that stuff behind me, it still has to go through every object in the scene and say, are you behind me? Are you behind me? Are you behind me? And do that 1,000 times for everything in the scene. But what I intend to do is split the scene up into what I'm thinking of as render groups. And if I get far enough away, or I enter a trigger that's far enough away and like tells the camera to be facing a different way, I know that I'm not going to be looking at this render group, and I can turn it off. So an example of this system would be all of the trees in the jungle, all the trees in the fauna in the jungle, I would put those in a render group, call that jungle, and then when I go into the desert, let me actually jump in here and play so you can kind of see an example of what I'm talking about. The desert's camera forces you to look away from the jungle. Like you can't control the camera manually. It's just based on where you are in the world. So if I get over into the desert, I know until I leave the desert, the camera is never going to look at the jungle. And so I can, if I have this render group set up, I can just turn that game object off, and all the trees and all the plants will be off. And so the camera's culling step won't need to look at those things because they're all disabled. Hell, I could even do this for the ocean area, maybe, other than this rock wall here. So you just can't see over there. Yeah, so that maybe over here I could also do the jungle. And similarly in the jungle, I don't need to see anything in the desert, so I can turn off those like particle systems, and I can turn off the cactus and the grass and stuff. So that's a future optimization that I think will be useful. And really, the overworld runs pretty well already, so it's not like a huge concern. But as I fill in more art and actually like add details and stuff, it's going to be an ongoing process to it's going to be an ongoing process to make sure it stays running well. And once I add the toys and stuff, that's going to be another layer. Okay, so that's that. Okay, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. So I can just go into the work session, I guess. Just to mark for myself that this is where the weekly update part ends, I'm going to stop the stream and then start it up immediately. Don't get worried if the screen goes black for a second. Oh, thanks for coming. Be right back.